In exploring the intersection of history and faith, there is a significant work known for its profound content and wide influence: the Bible. This treasure of human civilization carries not just beliefs and doctrines, but also mysterious and thought-provoking prophecies. Bible scholar John Barton Payne, in his book Encyclopedia of Biblical Prophecy, meticulously details the numbers and specifics within this ancient text. Of the 31,124 verses in the Bible, a surprising 8,352 involve prophecies, making up an impressive 27%. These prophecies cover 737 separate events, over 500 of which have already come true, establishing the Bible as one of the most widely followed and mysterious books of prophecy in the world. The book of Revelation in the New Testament of the Bible is particularly notable for its 63% prophetic content. It serves not only as a guide for believers, but also as an endless source of inspiration in culture and art. The most famous aspect is its predictions about the end of the world and the final judgment. These parts have sparked limitless imagination and deep thought, influencing countless movies. When we examine the apocalyptic prophecies in Revelation, we can't help but think of the four horsemen of the apocalypse: pestilence, war, famine, and death. These figures are not just common in literature and art. They also make us think of the series of international events troubling humanity in recent years. In this age of information overload and uncertainty, the concept of the end times seems not so far away. Today, let's explore the deeper meanings behind these mysterious prophecies and try to unravel the age-old mysteries hidden in biblical predictions. In exploring the Bible, a spiritual heritage of humanity, we often pause at the last book of the New Testament, Revelation. The author identifies himself as John, and there was indeed a John among Jesus' 12 disciples. However, whether the author and the disciple are the same person has been a topic of much debate. Despite this, most Christians believe that John, one of Jesus' 12 disciples, wrote Revelation. He was not only Jesus' favorite disciple, but also the longest living one after Jesus' crucifixion. Before Jesus was crucified, he entrusted John with the care of his mother, Mary. John fulfilled this duty, moving with Mary to Ephesus, Asia's largest city, where he took care of her until she passed away. Around 95 AD, John was exiled to the island of Patmos in the Aegean Sea, a desolate place. There, in a cave, he had a vision where Jesus showed him the events of the upcoming apocalypse, the punishment of Satan and the fallen angels, and the beauty of the new world, much like a movie unfolding before him. Inspired by God, John wrote down Revelation, completing the Bible, which many consider a history book from God's perspective, narrating the universe's origin, human development, and future, and depicting the new world after the apocalypse. The prophecies of the apocalypse in Revelation begin with the Lamb of God, opening a scroll sealed with 7 seals. This lamb, with 7 horns and 7 eyes, symbolizes God's 7 spirits. The opening of the first 4 seals introduces the Four Horsemen, signifying 4 great calamities to befall humanity. As the subsequent seals are opened, even greater disasters follow. When the Lamb opens the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Then 7 angels receive 7 trumpets, and as they sound them, more severe calamities are announced. Finally, 7 angels are given 7 bowls filled with God's wrath, poured onto the earth, sea, and air, indicating no nation will be spared. The appearance of the 4 horsemen marks the beginning of the end, a path of continuous suffering until the birth of a new world. Revelation also includes a warning in chapters 22. If anyone adds to them, God will add to him the plagues described in this book. And if anyone takes away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God will take away his share in the tree of life and in the holy city, which are described in this book. This warning ensures the accuracy and integrity of Revelation's transmission through the ages. In the book of Revelation, the story of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse is like an ancient mystery, always sparking our imagination. The first to appear is the white horseman. Revelation describes him this way. I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror, bent on conquest. This description brings to mind a warrior unbeatable in battle, not the prince on a white horse, as we often imagine. He carries a bow and wears a crown, symbolizing an unstoppable force. Traditionally, he is interpreted as a symbol of pestilence. Since the outbreak of COVID-19 in late 2019, the world has seen over 470 million infections and more than 60 million deaths. In 2021, Nature interviewed over 100 immunologists, virologists, and health experts globally. Nearly 90% of them believe that COVID-19 cannot be eradicated. A medical professor from the University of East Anglia in the UK, Professor Hunter, even stated that the coronavirus will always be with us, and we must be prepared to coexist with it. When the pandemic first began, some said they could almost hear the distant hoofbeats of the Four Horsemen. Of course, another interpretation suggests that the white horseman represents strife, such as conflicts between nations, instability in beliefs, and internal contradictions and struggles. When these conflicts become irreconcilable, the second horseman, the red horseman, is awakened. These symbols and metaphors make us wonder whether these ancient texts indeed foreshadow the challenges and dilemmas we face today. In the book of Revelation, the red horseman symbolizes war and conflict. He carries a sword to provoke war. The original text of Revelation describes it this way. When the Lamb opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come." Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword. If the COVID-19 pandemic that started in 2020 made some people skeptical about the arrival of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war in February 2022 seemed to confirm that the harbingers of an apocalyptic disaster had arrived. Ukrainian President Zelensky, in an interview with CNN, even suggested that if negotiations between Russia and Ukraine failed, it could lead to World War III. While some consider this statement exaggerated, it's crucial not to take the situation lightly. Looking back at history, the start of World War II, often marked by Hitler's invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939, was not an overnight event, but the culmination of a series of seemingly unrelated incidents. For instance, Japan's invasion of Manchuria in 1931, Italy's invasion of Abyssinia in 1935, the remilitarization of the Rhineland and the Spanish Civil War in 1936, Germany's annexation of Austria, and the Sudeten crisis in 1938. These events were like rising water levels that eventually overflowed the dam. Today, we have also witnessed a few years of rising tensions. Although it took the Russia-Ukraine war to bring widespread attention, if World War III were to break out, it would be significantly different from the first two world wars, potentially being a catastrophic and destructive conflict, especially since 9 countries possess nuclear weapons. The outbreak of war inevitably brings famine. Following the red horseman is the black horseman, representing famine. The appearance of the black horseman in the book of Revelation symbolizes the onset of famine. He carries a pair of scales, indicating the imbalance of resources and scarcity of goods. Revelation describes it like this. When the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures, saying, "A quart of wheat for a day's wages, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and the wine." Here, a day's wages could only buy a very limited amount of food, indicating a more than 10-fold increase in prices. Oil and wine, typically abundant in the Mediterranean region, have become scarce and valuable resources, signifying the severity of famine. This is not just a sign of hunger, but a direct consequence of the war-induced imbalance between supply and demand. For example, following the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022, global prices, especially for oil, skyrocketed, making driving a luxury for many. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, Russia is the third largest oil producer in the world, producing about 10.5 million barrels per day, with a significant portion exported to Europe. If Russia's oil exports are disrupted, it would create a huge gap in global energy supplies, inevitably leading to rising oil prices. Additionally, Russia and Ukraine are major global wheat exporters, and their involvement in the war has severely impacted the global food supply chain. Furthermore, the production of fertilizers and pesticides, heavily reliant on Russian supplies, has been affected by the war. This dependency, coupled with rising oil prices, has impacted the cost and yield of crops. The increase in food prices also raises the cost of raising poultry and livestock, leading to higher prices for meat. The rise in oil prices not only affects the transportation industry, but also increases the cost of transporting raw materials and products. This results in higher prices for goods in both offline retail and online stores. The impact is like a domino effect, where each industry is interconnected and influences each other. Since the outbreak of the war, Russia has faced various forms of international sanctions, including financial, technological, and trade sanctions. These sanctions have not only impacted Russia, but also the global economy. Svein Tore Holsether, CEO of Yara International, one of the world's largest fertilizer companies, has stated that the issue is not whether we are entering a global food crisis, but how severe this crisis will be. All signs indicate that the black horseman of the apocalypse, symbolizing famine, is on its way. The last of the four horsemen of the apocalypse in the book of Revelation is the rider on the pale horse, representing the most terrifying force, death itself. The original text says, "When the Lamb opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, 'Come.' I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over a fourth of the earth to kill, by sword, famine, plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth." This suggests that when all four horsemen come together, a quarter of the world's population will face the threat of death. It's important to note that the horsemen do not disappear one after the other. They can coexist, and their induced disasters are cumulative and intertwined. When the Lamb opened the fifth seal, John saw an altar with the souls of martyrs beneath it, crying out for God to judge and avenge their blood. God then clothed each soul in a white robe and said something quite despairing. The number of their fellow servants and brothers who were to be killed as they had been was still not complete. Following this, the Lamb opened the sixth seal, causing dramatic changes in the earth and sky. The sun turned black. The moon turned blood red. Stars fell to the earth, and there were earthquakes and upheavals. These descriptions seem to predict extreme natural disasters, such as solar eclipses, blood moons, earthquakes, tsunamis, or even asteroid impacts. In many religions and folklores, a blood moon is often seen as an ominous sign. In ancient China, it was considered a symbol of evil and despair. In ancient Europe, it was believed to be the time when vampires and werewolves roamed. The Mayans and Indians also viewed it as a harbinger of disaster. However, astronomers have clarified that a blood moon is just a natural phenomenon, a type of lunar eclipse. It occurs when the moon passes into the Earth's shadow, blocking the sun's light. The Earth's atmosphere filters out all colors of sunlight except red, which is then reflected onto the moon, creating the blood moon effect. Despite this scientific explanation, the historical association of blood moons with disasters continues to intrigue many. In AD 79, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius buried the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum. Prior to this disaster, historical records mention the appearance of a blood moon, which people interpreted as divine punishment for Rome, foreshadowing the impending catastrophe. In 1777, during the American Revolutionary War, blood moons frequently appeared. During these tumultuous times, the blood moon was seen as an ominous sign by soldiers and civilians alike, symbolizing war and sacrifice. In 1900, during the Boxer Rebellion in China, a blood moon appeared again, marking a year of conflict and foreign invasion, leading to numerous deaths. In 1914, just before the outbreak of World War I, a blood moon appeared in the European night sky, interpreted by many as a precursor to large-scale slaughter and turmoil. In 1939, right before the start of World War II, another blood moon appeared, leaving a profound impression on people and considered a warning of a global disaster. In 2003, shortly after a blood moon was sighted, the SARS epidemic broke out, affecting many parts of the world, especially Asia, causing significant social and economic impacts. In 2014, the day after a rare series of blood moons began, South Korea experienced the Sewol Ferry disaster, resulting in the loss of over 300 lives. In 2022, as the world grappled with the COVID-19 pandemic and political tensions between several nations, the blood moon appeared once again in the night sky. According to NASA's calculations, the next series of blood moons is expected to occur between 2032 and 2033. Could this be the moment when the Lamb opens the sixth seal? When the Lamb opened the seventh seal in the book of Revelation, there was a half hour of silence in the sky, a solemn moment for the saints to pray to God. Then 7 angels each received a trumpet, and the sounding of these trumpets was not only a warning of disasters, but also symbolized the beginning of various judgments. As the first angel sounded the trumpet, hail and fire mixed with blood rained down from the sky, burning a third of the trees and grass on earth, causing unprecedented destruction. This first trumpet signaled devastation of the land. Following this, the second angel sounded his trumpet, turning a third of the sea into blood. A third of the sea creatures died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. This second trumpet seemed to announce the catastrophe of the oceans. When the third angel sounded his trumpet, a third of the rivers and all the sources of water on the earth became contaminated and bitter, causing people who drank this water to die. This third trumpet destroyed the sources of life-sustaining water. Then, the fourth angel sounded his trumpet, causing a third of the sun, moon, and stars to lose their light, leaving a third of the day without light, as if both light and hope had vanished at that moment. The scenes in the book of Revelation are full of mystery and symbolism. From the first to the fourth trumpet, we see the earth, oceans, rivers, and sky, essential for human survival, continuously suffering destruction. Then, an eagle flies across the sky, its cry echoing around the world, foretelling more disasters to come. The sounding of the fifth trumpet plunges the world into endless darkness, while the sixth trumpet takes away a third of humanity's lives. However, when the seventh trumpet sounds, a vision appears in the sky. A woman clothed with the sun, standing on the moon, and wearing a crown, is in the pain of childbirth. Beside her is a red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, seemingly waiting to devour the child she is about to give birth to. Different religions interpret the identity of this woman differently. Catholics believe she is the Virgin Mary, with the child in her womb being Jesus, returning to earth. Protestants interpret the woman as a symbol of all people who believe in God. After giving birth, the woman flees with her child to the wilderness, where God has prepared a refuge for them. They hide there for 1,260 days, precisely 3.5 years. This exact number might indicate that a future event will last the same duration. The book of Revelation, known as the most mysterious and challenging to interpret in the Bible, is full of detailed prophecies, yet many of its symbols are hard to explain, with no definitive answers. It's somewhat like the prophecies of Nostradamus, which often become clear only in hindsight after events have unfolded. But the prophecies of Revelation do not merely end with the destruction of the apocalypse. After a series of earth-shattering disasters, the survivors are said to enter a new era. In my research, I discovered an intriguing detail in the 19th chapter of Revelation. It speaks of a fifth horseman, distinct from the four horsemen of the apocalypse, riding a white horse. The passage says, "I saw heaven standing open, and there before me was a white horse, whose rider is called Faithful and True. With justice he judges and wages war. His eyes are like blazing fire, and on his head are many crowns. He is dressed in a robe dipped in blood, and his name is the Word of God." The armies of heaven were following him, riding on white horses and dressed in fine linen, white and clean. On his robe and on his thigh he has this name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. This fifth rider, known as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, seems to represent rebirth after destruction. He will establish a new world of truth and faith on the ruins of the old one. Does this imply that disaster, beginning with the white horse of the four horsemen, leads to rebirth through this fifth horseman? Does it mean that the darkest times are closest to the dawn? Therefore, in the toughest of times, we should lift our spirits, as with each step forward, we might be getting closer to the first light of dawn.